This week's Who the Folk podcast is sponsored by Hodroff Epstein Memorial Chapels. Established more than 90 years ago, Hodroff Epstein is family-owned and operated with locations in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The staff has years of experience caring for families of all walks of life. Families choose Hodroff Epstein because of a dedication to service, integrity, and serving the needs of their clients. For more information, go to hodroffepsteinmemorialchapels.com. Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jew Folk. This week I talked to recently retired State Representative Frank Hornstein. We reflect on his 22 years in the state legislature, his love for transportation policy, and what he's looking forward to in retirement on this week's Who the Folk podcast. First, a couple notes about this week's episode. First, we recorded live in the community area at the Linden Hills Co-op, so any background noise is from that, and we certainly thank any of Frank's former constituents that we may have annoyed in the process of this recording. Also, after the end credits, you can listen to Frank's retirement speech that he gave on the floor of the House of Representatives on May 20th, and I wanted to thank Barry LaGrave and Mike Cook from the Minnesota House of Representatives Public Information Services for getting us that audio. But before all of this gets started, this week's podcast is brought to you by TC Jew Folk's Minnesota Mamala's Stories from the Tribe event on June 24th at Bethel Synagogue. Stories from the Tribe is a live, on-stage summer show featuring 12 true and original stories somehow threaded to being, or having, a mamala. The good, the bad, the golden, and the hilarious. Tickets are now on sale and going fast. You can get them and more information at bit.ly/mamalas. That's bit.ly/MAMMALEHS. State Representative Frank Hornstein, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Great to be here.
Very excited to get to talk to you. This has been a long time in the coming. You've over text back in February when you announced that you were retiring from the legislature, you really wanted to know when you were going to get to be on Who the Folk. And so I said at the time, and I'm a man of my word, after the session ends, we will sit down and we will wrap it up, put a nice, neat bow on your time in the legislature, and here we are.
And it's great to be here.
Very excited to get to do this today. So this past week, as you and I are talking, a couple weeks ago when this is going to air, your 11th term in the state legislature, 22 years representing the state of Minnesota and your districts around Minneapolis, has come to an end. I guess for starters, why the decision now to retire?
22 years is a good stint. And I felt that many of the things that I'd wanted to accomplish had been accomplished. Not everything, of course. There's always work to do. Always things left undone. But as Pirkei Avot says, it's not our task to complete the work, but it's also not our task to desist from doing it. And so I'll be continuing to work on the issues that I've championed over the years.
You come from an organizing background. Before you decided to run for the legislature, notably, you were part of the group that founded Jewish Community Action. What was it that led you to take the leap from community organizing to public service in this way?
Fantastic question. I mean, I would just answer it by saying Paul Wellstone. Paul Wellstone modeled what an activist and progressive public official can do and can be, opening doors to people that usually don't have access to government, don't have access to the process in public spaces like city halls and United States Senate or the state capitol. And really in his time, he birthed a whole new generation of people who have either organizing backgrounds or similar to pursue public office. And I think his legacy really can be seen in our caucus, in the House DFL caucus now, with so much young energy and diversity in people that come from organizing and advocacy backgrounds.
Did running for office seem like the natural next step for you out of that organizing background? There's obviously lots of things you could do as an organizer without putting your name forward to be on a ballot, right?
Yeah, it really did. It really did. I had been in the organizing world for going on 20 years in various capacities, different nonprofits, and it seemed to me that this was a great place to make a difference. And again, the influence and impact of Paul Wellstone was central to that, even in the 1990s. That's what planted the seed. And in politics, it's kind of being in the right place at the right time when you're running. And so the seat opened up on relatively short notice in this neighborhood.
Okay.
I've represented areas to the south of Lake Street in the legislature and also to the north of Lake Street. The time has been pretty much evenly split. And so this area south of Lake Street, to the east and west of Bede-Makaska and Lake Harriet, more or less opened up. And I was lucky enough to get endorsed and continue to serve all these years.
You've made, one of your policy areas, you've been the chair of the House Transportation Finance Committee for a number of years, right?
Yes, I mean, all told, it's 8 years because I've chaired it the last 6 years, and then I chaired it the last time we had a trifecta.
Okay.
And then I chaired for 4 more years, a policy committee related to transportation. So if I'm doing my math, I've chaired various transportation committees for 12 years.
That's a
lot of transportation.
That's a lot of transportation. What is it about that as a specific field that really appealed to you as a policy area that you wanted to put that much time and energy into? Because like chairing a committee, being a committee chair, takes up a ton of time and focus.
Yes, absolutely. And really come out of the environmental movement. But I served, if you really add up all the public service, then it's 24 years because I served on the Metropolitan Council for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And it was really at the Met Council that I saw the way transportation and particularly public transit link to environmental issues, whether it's urban sprawl, whether it's clean air. And then there's a whole social justice element to that. Whereas people need to get to work. People need jobs, and to get what good is a job if you can't get there?
Right.
And then it has so much to do with how our cities are planned and laid out. And so this just became a natural focus for me. I always thought I'd be on the Environment Committee, but I signed up to be on Transportation Finance my freshman year, and I've been on that committee every single term. So if I wasn't chairing it, I was serving on it.
Do people tend to jump around between different policy areas that are of interest to them, or do they really stick with something like this?
It's another fantastic question.
Oh,
I think that for the most part, people come with some expertise already. Everyone comes, I think, with some expertise already in a particular field. We have lots of teachers. We have school board members, and they gravitate towards education. We have a number of farmers, and they gravitate towards agriculture. It doesn't mean that becomes their sole focus or only thing that they're concerned about, but people do seem to follow a little bit their professional backgrounds or personal interests.
Okay.
But having said that, people do, rotate in and out of different committees over the years. And sometimes you don't serve on any particular committee, and sometimes, like me, you're always on one among many.
Sure.
Right? Energy and climate is another area of interest of mine, and I've served on the Energy Committee many times. It's a little like when you're in high school or in college, trying to make different classes fit into a schedule. So you can't always... transportation, I think at one time met at the same time as environment, so I couldn't be I think I've only been on the environment once.
Okay.
But that was more of a scheduling issue rather than an area of lack of passion.
Right, because like you said, there's there's so many ways in which the core sort of ethos of those committees overlap, right? Transportation, environment, all, there's a lot of, overlap in those two areas.
Yeah, definitely. And, in every committee you get to know the entire state. I commented that our title is State Representative. And so I can tell you almost any corner of the state what highways need repair, what transit systems need repair, what the issues are. And I've traveled the state, and talked to county commissioners and local officials about their transportation needs. It's a wonderful thing. It's a unique thing to be a part of.
Was there ever a time you aspired to an office higher than state representative?
Not really. I always was interested in, being a committee chair, and not really even caucus leadership. And I love the work, and it's not necessarily about getting to the next level, but trying to do your best at where you're at.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people use the legislature as a stepping stone, or try to use it for something higher. Some,
but not. But the vast majority of people, I think, come in and do their thing, and it seems like there are people that run for Congress, for example, and it'll attract multiple legislators.
Yeah.
We've had former Speaker Anderson Kelleher ran for governor. We've had a number of people run for governor, Marty Seifert, others, Matt Dean. I should really go over all the people I've served with that have run either for Congress or governor. But It's interesting. I mean, I've served with 3 sitting Congress people over the term.
Wow.
People who are currently in Congress, and that would be Congresswoman Omar, Congressman Emmer, and someone else who I'm missing.
Congresswoman Fishbach?
Yes, Michelle Fishbach was was a state senator, correct.
Okay.
So 3.
3 of 8. That's a, decent percentage.
Kind of amazing when you think of that. And, so there have been many others even before that. Keith Ellison and I were seatmates for 4 years. And others I can't think of.
That's a lot of, you've seen a lot of legislators come through in a 22-year period.
Come and gone. Yeah, I myself and Dean Erdahl and Mike Nelson, who are retiring this year, are the 3 senior members of the DFL caucus, and there's one other Republican who served longer than we have.
Okay.
So we were up there in seniority.
There's a lot of institutional knowledge, though, that leaves with you when you choose to retire. How do you go about passing that on?
Well, I have really strong relationships with a lot of our new folks, and it's different when you're not there every day, but there's people who I know that I'll remain friends with for life, and so I hope that I can still use my skills and my background and whatever knowledge is valuable for people, for the institution.
I mean, you've got a lot of knowledge, and I think it's going to be valuable because, again, when you're around that long, you see so much, and people need to know how to sort of take that information and use it appropriately to continue making policy.
Yes, but I would really say, and I want to emphasize this, and it really became clear last year when we accomplished so much in the trifecta, is that this new group of people that has been elected going back to 2018 has just, I think, contributed so much, and they've created a new path. They're not necessarily interested in going down a traditional path. And I think we accomplished so much really because of them and because of the fact that so many of the issues we worked on last year and this year, of course, paid family leave, clean energy, 100% clean energy by 2040. All the transportation stuff we passed, just those three things, for example, and there were many, 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 many other things.
Right.
Those were a result of community organizing over basically a generation.
Yeah.
If you consider 20 years a generation,
I think it's about the number, right?
Then when people say generational change, this really was generational change because it took a generation or longer to get these policies in place. Driver's license for all. I was working on that even at Jewish Community Action in the early 2000s, late 1990s. So it takes a long time. And just to use that as an example,
yeah,
it was a pretty radical idea back in 2007 when we decided in the Transportation Committee to do an informational hearing on people who are undocumented getting a driver's license. And then a couple years later, we passed the bill out of that committee. And then it didn't go any further than that.
Yeah.
And then by 2013, that trifecta, we were able to get that bill at least onto the floor.
Okay.
And then, then the rest is history. We
I
passed it off the floor in 2018 and 2020.
And I think that really helps illustrate how incremental change can happen. And that it's not an overnight thing as much as some people, myself included on some issues, would want it to be. That it's just change takes time.
Yes, and I think there were definitely people that had expectations this year that, you can just pass this bill.
Right.
A couple of folks came with different great ideas to the Transportation Committee, but ideas that would really be years and years and years in the making.
Right.
They're like, why can't you hear this bill? Why can't you pass this bill? Even in this situation, it takes time.
Right. It takes time, and it's also, yes, it's a DFL trifecta, but the majorities are very narrow in both the House and the Senate. So one of the things that one of your fellow retiring state representatives, Heather Edelson, said to me, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote, is that the DFL caucus is not of one mind.
Yeah.
That what one person in one district really wants doesn't necessarily work for somebody else in another district, because you're representing, yes, your own ideals, but also the people who voted you in, what they want also. You are their voice. So, yeah, it's not easy to be able to pass and move the things along that you want, because there may be great ideas that you didn't get to. I'm sure there were fabulous ideas in the Transportation Committee that you didn't get to this year because it just wasn't going to be workable for the state and what was right for the state. Absolutely correct.
And again, there's regional variation, there's ideological variation. The DFL is still a big tent party, but I have to give our speaker and majority leader a lot of credit for holding everyone together last year. And there was this sense from the veterans of the first trifecta and people who had heard about the first trifecta, that's 2013, 2014, that a lot of things were left hanging. And I think the speaker felt like, okay, this is our chance, we're going to get it done. And we did.
I mean, the first session of the trifecta, last year's session, the 22-23 session, was, or I guess all in 2023, after the 22 election, was, I mean, just a whirlwind of progressive policy.
Right, and we started out fast and kept going. And, there was a sense maybe some of this might fall apart during the budget times, but it didn't. Even though there were many interests that wanted it to fall apart, and it didn't, and people held together. And even something like health care for undocumented folks, that was something that in the end, would we be able to hold on and pull that off, because it was quite controversial.
Right.
We did. So and the governor signed these bills, and it was extraordinary. It really felt being part of history, and that's another. For me, it's like kind of going out on a bit of a high note because, every session has its characteristics, but I just don't feel, it would be wonderful to have sessions like that every year, but we just did so much, and it was an incredible thing to be a part of.
I know this is sort of a really big question, so bear with me.
Sure.
But looking back at 22 years in the legislature, I'm not going to ask you to name the most consequential piece of legislation you've been a part of, but what are some of the most consequential?
Well, marriage equality was incredible. That was there were two phases of that. One was to stave off a constitutional amendment which would have banned it in 2012. So that was the 2012 election, and then to turn around in 2013 and then pass a bill making love the law, as we say. And that was just tremendously rewarding and satisfying, and it affected so many people's lives. Overriding the governor on the transportation bill after the 35W bridge collapsed that felt like winning the Super Bowl. But I think the transportation bill we crafted this year was even better. So, those are some moments I remember. I think that the driver's license for all, just the emotion of that, and, stepping out of the chamber when that passed the floor the first time was amazing. And then, of course, when it passed into law was also an incredible moment. There was a bill signing ceremony at the Armory, and just the happiness and people crying and out of happiness. It's those are moments I'll never forget.
What was it like? Monday the 20th of May was your retirement speech on the floor. Obviously, you had announced several months ago that was your plan. What was it like, though, as the session wrapped up, to give that speech and then walk off the floor the last time? What were you feeling?
It was very sad because I love the place, and it's been such a part of my life. But, I really didn't have a chance to think about the speech in that day very much because we were scrambling till the end on so many of these bills. Even the last day, the last hours of the legislature, we had to open up the transportation bill after it was wrapped up in the conference committee to include the Uber-Lyft agreement that had happened. Again, so many different people had to sign off on that. The House, the Senate, the drivers, the governor, Uber-Lyft executives. So that was just a must-pass situation.
Oh, absolutely.
And it was carried in the transportation bill. So really, up until the end, these are very, you have to be very, very attentive to what's happening, getting everybody together to vote, to set an agenda. That was all happening really right up until the end. And then, of course, we had the big bill at the end that had to pass.
It's the details that make these sorts of legislation, and it's fine margins to get those things passed.
Yeah, and a lot of process has to go into it, and people have to be checked off with, and oftentimes at the end of session there's not a lot of notice. So it's just time to spring into action. So I literally was back on the floor less than 12 hours after all of this. But I certainly thought about what I'd wanted to say, but I don't usually type out speeches or things like that ahead of time. So just jot down a few thoughts and then see what comes out.
So I don't want to go too much into it because we're going to we'll include the audio of your speech and the link to the YouTube in the show notes for people to listen to or watch at the end of this podcast. But one of the things you talked about was your brand new granddaughter.
Yeah.
Mazel tov to you and,
Thank you.
and to your wife, the estimable Rabbi Marsha Zimmerman on the birth of your first grandchild.
Yes.
Give us a little insight about the name, though, because that was a really touching piece of your speech.
Yeah, so Lucia was my mother's name of blessed memory, and she was a Holocaust survivor and, has an incredible story. And, she was really part of the Polish underground resistance, not the Warsaw, not the Jewish resistance, but there was a second uprising in 1944, which the Polish nationalists uprising. They got the idea from the first one.
Okay,
but,
excellent.
Or so I've heard. And she has a fighting spirit, and so I thought about the generations. That's why I said Lador Vador. But I think the work we do at the legislature, the work we do in our community organizations, I want Lucia, who was born 3 weeks ago, to inherit a world where people don't have to worry about basic human rights and their safety and a climate that's sustainable and all the issues that we work on. So it felt like there is generational change going on in politics, and there's generational change going on in communities, and I just want her to inherit a world that's going to be peaceful and safe and clean.
It's feels like this full circle moment for you of leaving this job as that next generation is being born and coming into this world that you have spent the last 22 years as an elected official and decades before as an organizer trying to make better for them, for your children and now your grandchildren.
Yeah, and I think that someone asked the other day, well, can you point to things that have changed? And there's so many things that have changed as a result of people coming together. But we're on the eve of, we always say this, this is the most important election of our lifetime. But this one really does feel that there's so much at stake.
Yeah.
And in a way that hasn't been before, particularly because I think we know what we see a global leadership that's illiberal and tends towards totalitarianism, and I just know my parents would be quite upset. And we have two melded families, the Hornsteins and the Ornsteins, and the Hornsteins and Ornsteins were also a melded family in a small town in Hungary called Hajdunánas, which is on the eastern part of the country near a larger town called Debrecen. But anyway, so these two couples, my father, Stephen Hornstein, and my mother, Lucia Hornstein, and then Paul and Anna Ornstein, were married shortly. Both couples were married shortly after the war. They received a medical education in Germany after the war, vowed not to separate again, and then settled in Ohio, where I grew up. So the last remaining survivor of this group is Anna Ornstein, who's 97 years old and lives in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, in Brookline.
Okay.
And she is so concerned about Trump, as a survivor. And this has just become, anytime you talk to her, she asks people who, especially younger folks who come to visit her, what are you doing to make sure Trump doesn't get elected? And so, I think this is part of this Vador responsibility we have, and at least in my view. Other of your listeners and readers may feel differently, but I do feel we are at a very critical tipping point in the country and in the world, for that matter, in Israel too.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
Well, it's a great question.
You're retired. You don't have to race back. You don't have to campaign. None of that.
Well, I'll certainly help our candidates this year. I'd like to go back to, working for nonprofits and doing issue-based work. I think there's a lot of people that are effective at the legislature, and a lot of people that, from the community, and others that are new to this work. And if I can help them in any way, that I think would be a way to empower our growing grassroots attention at the legislature. I mean, there's people showing up at the legislature and groups showing up at the legislature that weren't there 22 years ago. And they're making change and they're making a difference. So that's something on my mind for sure.
You mentioned the class of 2018 of electeds that came in that year, and you talk about this being the most important election, and it seems like, and this is something that Congressman Phillips has said to me, getting spurred into action because of the results of the 2016 election. Did you see that same thing in the legislature of that sort of group?
Oh, there were definitely people that, if you asked them why they ran, they would say 2016. And, there's others that were, I know of at least one state senator that was inspired to run because of the marriage equality campaign. So I think that people do, it's a great question, because people do respond to what they see around them. And, how can I make a difference? It's not to say we had great people in 2020 and great people in 2022. 57 of our 70 House DFL members have not served in the minority.
Wow.
So that means that we have 57 people that have been elected since 2018.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. And, the largest group was 2018, but then there's a group that's affectionately called the COVID class, because they got elected in 2020, and then we had a whole new crop last year, too.
Yeah.
And then it's a result of both turnover, Democratic seats turning over that are safe seats, but then we've won a number of seats in the suburbs. It seems like we're moving a little bit further out. We have a Democratic representative in Chaska and Chanhassen now, which we never had before.
Right.
And so, our numbers are increasing. I think there's a decent chance we'll retain the trifecta. But these state elections are really more of a reflection of the national mood.
Oh.
So, yeah, obviously if someone works hard and door knocks, you'll eke out that 100 or 200 vote win.
Right.
But generally, these close seats are decided based on the national mood, in my opinion.
Well, it's funny, I don't disagree, and then you hear you think of the adage, all politics is local.
Yeah.
Which, yes, but also local politics and local results are often driven by national trends.
Right. It's that, but all politics is grassroots. And so, if you do the door knocking and the relationship building and you show up at community events, the sort of the textbook campaigning, in a close race, you stand a good chance to win.
I think that, reflecting back on the question of why you didn't want to run for something bigger, I think running for a bigger office, it becomes harder to do that grassroots retail campaigning that you're really good at.
Other people would, yes, thank you. Other people would have to do that. I mean,
exactly.
People send out groups of door knockers, and we door knock apartments a lot in the area I represent, and that's important because that's a group of people that is often not engaged the same way a homeowner might be in terms of people coming to knock on a door.
Sure.
You have to make arrangements ahead of time. There's a little, depending on the building, there's a little bit more transition happening. Mm-hmm. So we register a lot of voters that way. So, I think, again, Paul Wellstone pioneered ways in which we can reach voters and, house parties, things like that. So, yeah, I'll miss that. There's a lot of things I'll miss. But I'm very confident that we're going to have a great legislature next year, a great 2025 session. Even with some of the looming state budget issues, I think we'll still do good things for people.
Excellent. Last couple questions, Frank.
Yeah.
We'll let you continue on with retirement. First,
Yeah.
what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, gosh. Love them all. But I do have to say Passover. This has been a very special tradition in the Hornstein families, celebrating this together since the late 1940s. And so we have always made a point to be together, whether it was in Cincinnati, more recently in Boston.
Okay.
And now there's the next generation, which is starting to take ownership of leading the service. So, no, I love them all, but I think Passover stands out. And Yom Kippur I like a lot too. It's difficult. It's difficult. The fall holidays, but if I had to choose one, if I really had to choose one, it'd be Passover.
Okay. And what's your favorite Jewish food?
Well, that's a tough one too, because I like them all. I would say my wife's brisket.
Oh.
My wife's brisket is unbeatable.
Is it?
If that's considered Jewish food. And
that is considered a Jewish food.
Matzo ball soup too, her matzo ball soup.
How does she have the time to cook while also leading?
I don't know if the audience knows that she's so multi-talented. She's an amazing cook.
I assumed as much, but that's...
she's an amazing cook and loves it.
Awesome.
She loves feeding people. She loves, everything about cooking and hospitality.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So the hospitality she extends at the synagogue to people coming to worship there and to learn there extends towards the dinner table as well. So there's something tied with my wife's brisket.
Okay.
Tied. And it's all the more significant because you can't really get it here. Whitefish salad. So I'm looking forward to going to New York next week. And, one of the things I'm going to do is go to a deli and get some whitefish salad on a sesame bagel.
There you go. By the time folks have listened to this, Frank will have had his whitefish salad on a bagel, and we hope it was delicious.
Yes, I hope so too.
Wonderful. Frank Hornstein, thank you so much for this. This has been wonderful. Mazel tov on your retirement from the legislature. Mazel tov to what comes next. Mazel tov on your granddaughter.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for joining me.
And mazel tov to TC Jew folk for all you contribute to the community. And I've loved watching this institution grow over the years as well.
You're incredibly sweet. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, after that, I am going to be brief. I'm going to tell a story, and I'm going to do an impersonation. So first and foremost, my heart is so filled with gratitude, not only for each and every one of my colleagues that are here, all the staff over so many years, and our most recent incredible transportation staffers are here. I want to give a shout out to Tenzin Sangyang and Matt Bauman. We had a very complicated set of issues that we had to deal with this year, and you just hit it out of the park. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And this gratitude extends so much to my family, my amazing wife, who so many of you have gotten to know over the years, is here. I couldn't do this work without her. We're both in these public-facing jobs, and it's very, very challenging sometimes, but we keep each other going. And I'm so just filled with gratitude for Marcy. And, you know, the chief clerk, who we all just love so much, Pat Murphy, told me that we may have made a little history today. He tells me this is the first time in his memory, and he has if there's anyone that has historic memory about this amazing place we work in, it's Pat Murphy. He tells me this might be the first time a presiding officer introduced his spouse to give the prayer. So we witnessed a little history today. My sister Ruth is here, and I'm so pleased that she's able to join us. She's been such a part of this work as well, showing up at every caucus. We have a wonderful ritual of marching together in pride, and that will continue whether I'm a candidate or not. So thank you, Ruth, for all of your support. And, you know, my kids aren't here, but they grew up here, Rebecca, Naomi, and Max, and some of you may know them. Rebecca just had our first grandchild 3 weeks ago. Her name is Lucia, and we'll get to that in a minute. That's the story part, Representative Erdahl. And so she's a rabbi in the family tradition, but also a community organizer in the family tradition. And my daughter Naomi has always been here in many different occasions, and she's a teacher, a 7th grade social studies teacher at the Minneapolis Public Schools. And then my son Max, he lives in Brooklyn. He's a stand-up comic. So they all grew up here and have been so supportive, and I want to thank them in absentia. But it's really, so many have mentioned this, and I believe it in my heart, that this place runs on relationships. And the incredible relationships I've had on both sides of the aisle, I value, I treasure, and I've learned so much from every single person in this room and others that aren't here. And I've learned so much about the state. Someone had said at our freshman orientation a long time ago, Representative Erdahl, that your title is State Representative. You represent your district, but you also represent the state. And so never forget that title. And I've learned just from every corner of the state, I've learned so much about the issues, and particularly transportation. I've served on the Transportation Finance Committee every single term that I've been here since 2002, and so I can name just about every district and every highway that is needed and needs repairs, and transit systems, et cetera. I am so proud to represent a district that has generated so many amazing leaders in this body. And I want to give special shout out to several of them as well. So what people affectionately call my work husband, Senator Dibble, is here. And he has been a mentor, an amazing rock of support. And we have marriage equality in the state for many reasons, and many people have worked on it. But I think we have marriage equality because of Scott Dibble more than anything else. And whether it's working on homeless youth or all the transportation work we've done over the years, people wondered why I was moving after redistricting to stay in this position. And I said, you know, I want one more chance to write the transportation bill of my dreams with Scott Dibble, and we did that, and so I appreciate that. I get the chance to serve with Jamie Long. He has been such an incredible leader for our caucus. And the great part about serving with Jamie and Scott is that when we do our town hall meetings, it's like people will come up, as you know, as my colleagues know, they come up with, are wonderful, amazing constituents, come up with a lot of questions, and some of them are there's a lot of minutia to some of these questions, and nuance. And I don't have to worry about that because the two smartest people that I know in this chamber are my seatmates, Scott and Jamie, so I appreciate that. It's very fun to serve with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then we've also generated a couple of speakers out of our district that I've had the pleasure to serve with, Margaret Anderson Kelleher and Paul Thiessen. And before redistricting, I had the chance and honor to represent Senator Tina Smith. So we are really a place of leadership, and I've just valued and appreciated that so much. And Speaker Hortman, our friendship over the years, I value and treasure. And it's but the story I want to tell about the speaker is not so much about politics. It's about when my father of blessed memory died in 2008, and I went to his funeral. There was many things, details that had to happen. Many of you have had parents that have passed away. And I was chairing a conference committee on transportation policy at the time. And Speaker Hortman was on that committee. She took the gavel, and I had nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. So that's just one of many reasons I appreciate you so much, Madam Speaker. So here's the quick story. I've been thinking a lot about generations lately. In my tradition, we say l'dor v'dor, from generation to generation. And Representative Keeler has always reminded me that in good times and in tough times, you remember and feel, even in your body physically, the presence of your ancestors. And so I'm feeling that a lot these days. My mother died in 1998, but she was a true hero to me, and I think in many ways I'm here fighting because she gave me that fighting spirit. She fought the Nazis in the sewers of Warsaw and survived the Holocaust as my father did. And our granddaughter, who was born 3 weeks ago, her name is Lucia, the same name as my mother. And so I think that my daughter, who also has that fighting spirit for social justice, knew that generational passing down is so important. And so I think a lot about generations right now. And I think about the generations of people who have sat in these seats for so long. And we had a conversation just recently about the need to come together as a state and to fight the hate that is dividing us. And I look around this chamber and I see so many faces of people that have never been represented here before. And that's why we have to keep going. We have to keep that trend going. Young people, older folks, people from all backgrounds. That's what makes this place so very special. And so I hope that, again, my mentors, Speaker Kelleher and others, I'm just filled with such gratitude to you. And I just want to conclude with, since the speaker did say, she made a statement after I announced my retirement that she liked my Bob Dylan impression. So, and I just wasn't sure which song to choose, and my wife and I had a conversation about that. But the one I chose is one because whatever perspective you have, I think you come to this chamber with an interest in making change. We're not happy with the status quo. We're not happy. So we come here because we want to serve our constituents, and I want to thank my constituents so much. Those are the folks I've learned the most from, whether it's these one-to-one conversations we have in coffee shops, our town hall meetings, the phone conversations, the engagement, the meetings in our offices. That's who I've learned the most from, our constituents. So we're here because we want to make change on their behalf. And so this is the song I chose, and many of you may know the chorus, so I'm not going to sing the whole thing, just the first part. But as the man from Hibbing wrote this song back in the early 1960s, and he once said it meant a lot to him then, it means a lot to him now, it means a lot to me now. So for all of us who want to come here to make change, this is for you. Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, well, you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. Everybody sing with me. For the times they are a-changing. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the honor. Thank you for giving me the honor of a lifetime. Thank you so much.